Hello there, I'm JP.
Hello there, I'm WH.
And here we are, back with another episode of The Mandalorian to recap. And
That's right.
Bloody hell, mate. This one, you said it to me, it was like first message to me, because I was a couple of days late seeing this. And it was like another good episode, but I don't think it was like I was prepared for the direction that it took. Been desperate to talk about you ever since. And you just went Black Mirror. And that's the vibes I've very much got coming off this. So I'm like freaked out by that. So I haven't even asked how you are, mate. Shocking behavior on my part.
I got a message from like John Cena, on Friday, and he's like, "There's nothing happening in this episode," because I guess he didn't have a chance to watch it until Friday, and I'm just like, listen, I love things that expand the lore and the mythology of Star Wars. So I can still find things I enjoy in something as terrible as the Phantom Menace. There's still things I enjoy from there because it expands the lore of particularly the Jedi and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, that Phantom Menace also has our first real proper look at Coruscant as a setting, and so I'll always appreciate that about it. But I like this episode because I was reading your notes about it, and I liked the bookending of Bo-Katan and Din Djarin, at the beginning and the end, and then the middle part was firmly about, Dr. Pershing and Kane being part of this amnesty program, which we'll get to. That's really fucked up, by the way.
Yeah.
But I just love, this is what happens to Imperials after the war. After the New Republic takes over, there's this thing called the amnesty program. My favorite part, though, was when they touched the top of the mountain. The only natural part of Coruscant that still exists is the top of the tallest mountain on the planet, but it's not even taller than the largest skyscrapers on the planet. And they mention what that Coruscant is one of few city planets. The whole planet is a city. There's nothing natural on that planet except for this part of this mountain peak that peeks through that they've allowed to not cover up with, urban zoning or anything like that. And
but you're not allowed to touch it, of course.
Yeah, not allowed to touch it. I thought that was hilarious. by the way. But what did they had a specific term for city planets. I can't remember for the life of me. Like that, I was like, oh, okay, so there's more than one city planet in the galaxy, but they're not as common as maybe one would think in the Star Wars universe.
It's to start off on from the beginning of the episode as well. I mean, because I didn't see the direction that this was going to go in. In some ways, I kind of, when I think of Coruscant, I end up thinking of Andor, of course, that we recapped there and all the various kind of machinations. So seeing it kind of go into the universe of the Mandalorian, which at the beginning I didn't foresee this happening at all. And just to kind of recap and to start off on it, and this is all pre-credits as well. This is the longest episode of the Mandalorian.
It's a full hour because everything else up to this point has been basically 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah, it is. Full hour for this, and I don't know how long the opening sequence is, or pre-credits as well. But if what we open up with is Bo-Katan sitting in silence as Din Djarin wakes up. She asks him whether or not he saw anything alive down there as well. She explains, by the way, in relation to the falling, that it's just sort of he did fall. He wasn't dragged down by anything there. I was wrong on that one. But did he see anything alive down there? He says he didn't. So she's kept the encounter with the mythosaur secret. But you can tell it's kind of changed her, which you see later on towards the end of the episode. And as they're flying back to Kalevala, we have a load of TIE interceptors who turn up. And it's a hell of an opening dogfight that we get at the beginning here. We have Din jumping out of the ship at that point to kind of go down to get onto his Naboo starfighter at this stage. it's a hell of a cracking scene. Like,
Oh, it's great. I love
and
dog
it's
fights.
oh yeah, I know you're a big fan. Dog fights, saber fights, that's very much you. There, but manages to kind of get through. There's some nifty tricks and CGI and the like. And then once you think it's kind of over, and you think, okay, this is the sequence we're getting at the beginning of the episode, they're going towards the palace, which ends up being completely destroyed by a group of sort of TIE bombers on there. Bo-Katan wants to chase them off, but then what he sees on his radar is there's an absolute ton of TIE interceptors coming. So they manage to go off. He says, gives her the coordinates to go into hyperspace where they both, he says somewhere they're going to be able to go where they're going to be safe and allowed to leave Kalevala's atmosphere. But what did you make of that? And that's just the pre-credit sequence.
Well, I loved it. First of all, I'm like, whoa, what the fuck what a great start to this episode. And it's really misleading because it has nothing to do with the rest of the bulk of the middle part of this particular episode. But obviously, it's there to hook viewers in.
Yeah,
because I think if you start with Coruscant, I think people would probably really pan this episode. I wouldn't necessarily, but I think it was smart of them to hook people in with this exciting extended dogfight sequence. I think it's very telling. There's a couple of telling signs in this sequence where one is Bo-Katan. That's like when she sees like the swarm of TIE interceptors. She's like, this is more than any warlord has access to of like any one particular warlord. So I think it's hinting at possibility of Grand Admiral Thrawn showing up, who would be the guy who would have like a large majority of the Imperial remnant under his command somewhere out in the unknown regions, which is probably where he is from. We don't know if this is like hinting at maybe the First Order, the early hints of like them reappearing in the Star Wars universe leading up to the sequel trilogy. So she says that, but also like the fact that this is the first time as far as I can recall, this is the first time we've seen TIE interceptors. Everything else we have seen have been TIE fighters in The Mandalorian season 1 and 2. Is basically if you see an Imperial fighter, it's a TIE fighter. It's not an interceptor. Interceptors are piloted by a higher class of Imperial pilots. They are a higher class of fighter ship in the Empire. So I think that's also telling that this is also like, okay, who would have access to a bunch of TIE interceptors? Well, probably the big bad that we're hinting at, which is Grand Admiral Thrawn. So I like those aspects of this sequence as well. And I mean, you wrote in your notes, it was like narratively convenient that this is when they decide to bomb. But it's Star Wars. A lot of things are narratively convenient. They happen to like the Tantive 4 happens to like be ambushed by Darth Vader's Star Destroyer just above Tatooine.
Plots have to move. You do have to have plot machinations. Yeah, that wouldn't be like a, it's
C-3PO, R2-D2 just happened to be captured by Jawas who service the Skywalker, Luke's moisture farm. Of course.
Life is built upon a series of coincidences at times like this and kind of little interactions and the like as well. But you mentioned it there. After this, the episode goes in a whole new direction, and effectively what we get is an episode that's set on Coruscant, as you mentioned, where we meet Dr. Pershing, who might remember from earlier episodes, lad with the glasses, it's probably the easiest way, and a beard, who's quite a nervous character. And it opens up actually, I think this is one of the other Easter eggs that I read about on this, in the same arena where I think it's
the opera.
The opera, yes.
The tragedy of Darth Plagueis.
That's it. Yes. One of the best sequences, I think.
It is. Honestly, like Ian McDiarmid in that scene with Hayden Christensen explaining his story as under the tutelage of obviously Darth Plagueis was his master who he killed and then supplanted as the Sith Lord as Darth Sidious. I just the way he delivers that story to Hayden Christensen, he's just so brilliant. He's one of the like I say with Hugh McGregor, he's one of the highlights of the prequel trilogy. He's one of the
Mm,
most consistently good things in those 3 movies,
yeah.
along with Hugh McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi.
It's really funny though, 'cause you don't ever see him really doing anything else acting wise. Does he need to though?
I saw him in like this British television show where he's like, I think he's like a coroner in like Victorian era England. And he's like a detective or something like that as well. It's like one of those types of shows, but it's set in like, England's past in London. Like it's kind of a,
Is it set around like Jack the Ripper type stuff? Because there's a few things
kind
like
of like something like that. But I
yeah,
can't exactly remember that, but like what the title was. But like I was like, oh shit, Ian McDermott's in this, and he's a really, I mean, he's a classically
yeah,
trained British actor, so he's really fucking talented. Like, so to see him like in something where it's not anything to do with Star Wars, it's like, but it's cool for him because like Star Wars has made him a lot of money.
yeah.
So
And he
I'm
doesn't
sure
resent it. He's not. He
no,
didn't. He was never Alec Guinness, was
no.
he? No.
Well, who's never an Academy Award winning thespian either, who had like a massive career, and then Star Wars is like, but then Star Wars also let him do like retire and
Yeah,
just do pick and choose
and
whatever he
choose.
wanted to do. He didn't
Yeah,
have to do anything after Star Wars. It's just like, I got all this money because like that was his agreement with George. George is like, okay, what would it take me to get you to do Star Wars? And he's like, I want half the profits. I want, no, not half, but I want 10% of the profits, gross, not net, fucking gross. And then he's like, he's set. So
yeah.
smart man, Alec Guinness. He's a great actor. I love Alec Guinness, by the way. He's so
Always
great.
like very much an institution. Bridge over the River Kwai be like one of the like I remember my dad absolutely loving that.
What's that?
But
The
yes,
Lavender Hill Mob. That's a good one too.
yes.
He's good in
Oh
that
yes,
stuff.
the Ealing comedies. Oh,
Yeah.
they're fantastic. Kind Hearts and Coronets, brilliant. I used to love those studies about those back in the day. But what we see is he's giving in the same auditorium. Dr. Pershing is giving a speech to an audience about how the New Republic's amnesty program saved his life. One of the people we see is former Imperial Communications Officer Elia Kane, who had previously served under Moff Gideon, who we'll get into in a little bit because he is very much brought up. Talks about how he regrets working for the Empire in there, and about he had good intentions with the cloning research, and it developed because if there was organ cloning where he was brought up, his mother would have been saved as well, who he appeared to idolize and led him into being a scientist. But yes, now he's made it his life's work to ensure no one else has to endure the same loss that he had. He had hoped to build off, and one of a great reference here, off the Kaminoan. That's it. Kaminoan cloning techniques, using genetic strands, combining the best attributes and the rest of it. And afterwards, he ends up meeting a load of kind of aristocrats. There's one particular exchange where very much like part of Coruscant High Society is talking about how he was nearly drafted into the service, and his wife says that would have been with the Imperial military, and he says, Empire, Rebels, New Republic, I can't keep track. That's why I should just keep my mouth shut. And his wife says, we try not to get involved.
It harkens back to like Saw Gerrera's like speech with oh god, brain fart. What's his name? He's like my favorite character in that show. I can't remember.
You think of Andor, you're thinking of Stellan Skarsgård.
Stellan Skarsgård.
Yes.
Anyways, where he says, partisans, like partitionists, like, I can't keep, like, he can't keep track of all the rebel groups out there. And this person's like, basically he's suggesting that one bureaucracy is no different than the other bureaucracy to him. To these people, it's like, obviously the New Republic isn't going to like punish rich people for being rich, It's like, it doesn't matter who's in power, unless you were like the Bolshevik Revolution, then you or the Mao Revolution in China, then you're kind of fucked in that case. But like, not the New Republic, they're not going to go around like purging all the rich people of their status or money or class or anything like that. So they still exist. These people probably survived 30 years of the Empire, and now they're going to survive, the next, I don't know, 20 years of the New Republic before the First Order comes along.
Connor mentions there in the chat, because I've put this out on the YouTube channel there. He mentions Luthen Rail.
Luthen Rail. Sorry, I cannot fucking believe I forgot his name. He's like my favorite part of Andor.
Oh, honestly, story of my life on this one on here.
Oh, and he also puts Ecu Monopolis. That's the name of like what a planet is.
The city planet. Brilliant. Thank you, Connor. Really do appreciate that on there. So yes, he's, but rather than, thinking that somehow he's been accepted, Dr. Pershing, into high society, he's giving kind of what we might think of as the kind of speeches that like ex-political leaders, no matter how disgraced, go around the world to deliver. In fact, he's back in Amnesty Housing. And he's called over by a former group of former Imperials to have a drink. In there, he does recognise Elia Kane, who Doctor says that she had worked with him on Moff Gideon's ship. And they mention a couple of little conspiracies regarding Moff Gideon. I don't know what you make of these. That one of which he escaped custody before trial, or that he was hooked up to a mind flayer.
We'll find out what the mind flayer is.
Oh yeah,
I think there's a high level of secrecy with regards to Moff Gideon. Obviously, like we've heard reference to him being on trial for a war tribunal, for set up by the New Republic. Obviously, he's going to show up in this season because Giancarlo Esposito is doing the rounds for media to promote this show. Like I've seen him in group shops with Pedro Pascal and Emily Swallow and Katie Sackhoff and whoever. Like, so he's gonna be showing up in this show. I mean, he is like kind of like the Loki. If we make the analogy that like Grand Admiral Thrawn is Thanos in like the MCU, then Moff Gideon is Loki, basically, right? So he's the guy who's going to be setting up Grand Admiral Thrawn. Obviously, he works for Grand Admiral Thrawn. There is obviously someone he works for. And what Grand Admiral Thrawn's relationship to Palpatine and the First Order are remain a mystery. Maybe they'll always remain kind of in murky waters at those details. But I think it's really interesting, like the former Imperials speak of Moff Gideon in like these kind of hushed conspiratorial tones. Like he is kind of like their boogeyman. Like he is someone that they like they all feared. To the level of like, maybe like this era's version of Darth Vader in some respects.
Yeah. I mean, they seem to have kept it down absolute secrecy in terms of any casting or anybody, in terms of who is going to play Grand Admiral Thrawn at that stage.
I think Lars Mikkelsen did the voice on Rebels. And if you look at Lars Mikkelsen in real life, you could just put blue paint on that fucking guy, and he's fucking Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Yeah.
And I think he was fucking awesome on Rebels. Lars Mikkelsen. He's the brother of Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah.
Few people don't know, and he was like he did an episode of Sherlock where he's like this mad like sociopath criminal that like Sherlock and Watson have to fight in like the Benedict Cumberbatch series. He's fucking great. Like
yes.
I seriously hope
the Mind Palace.
Yeah, I seriously hope he is Grand Admiral Thrawn in live action.
Well, when in doubt, I think generally if you're going for kind of stature and gravitas, if you go towards Scandinavian actors these days, that appears to be definitely like the kind of go-to plan. What did you make of the kind of, and we haven't really spoken about it. I mean, we see it with Coruscant at the beginning, and we've seen it all throughout Andor in terms of the kind of the blissful ignorance that high society in Coruscant lives.
So initially, when he's being approached by like the high society of Coruscant, Dr. Pershing, that is. I got the feeling that they were like excited. Oh my God, you're going to create techniques that can extend our lives because we'll just, replace our organs that are failing with new organs, or we'll just transplant our consciousness into a new clone body or something like that. That's the impression I got when they're like glad handing him and just like, buttering up to him that they want him to continue his research. So maybe there's an aspect to that that we'll get to at some point. I don't know, but obviously the New Republic government, led by Mon Mothma, is like, no, we are not going down that route because we have seen what what can happen with like cloning technology kind of getting out of hand in the hands of a government, i.e., the clone troopers, and
Yeah.
like them helping, Palpatine overthrow the New Republic and kill all the Jedi, and thus, establishing him as the Emperor for 30 years. Just as an aside, I love the line that the armorer has in the Book of Boba Fett, where she says, "All this talk of the Empire, they didn't last 30 years. We've been around for thousands of years, the Mandalorians." And I just thought, what a great line. It is true though, like the
It
Empire
is.
only lasted for 30 years. So
Which is, I mean, Christ, it's nothing. I was in Rome recently, and I tell you what, you see the kind of, you think of it as being like kind of like a Roman Empire of sorts, but nowhere near the kind of longevity that even that managed to have. What did you make of the amnesty housing? Because I found this, like, I mean, this is where we're getting into kind of the idea that, where he's going to is very much the most bare basic of flats. I kept on thinking of Andor and about how someone like Cyril was living, for example, because you kind of like, what you end up seeing is this kind of like lower class in society. And this is not really anywhere, it hasn't really gone near these kind of themes.
they're not in the lower depths of
No.
Coruscant, which is where like I think also like they want to keep an eye on these people. So they're not necessarily going to, put them in the lower depths of Coruscant, the lower levels, and so like I think, and they expressly say this is a lot better than what the Empire would have done with people who were ex Republic soldiers or whatever who didn't want to join the Empire. That it reminded me like that building. I thought if they revealed that it was like former ISB headquarters, I thought that would have been so ironic and funny. But it was fine. But it does harken back. Obviously, they're trying to keep the aesthetic the same as what we see in Andor to some extent. But I also get like tons of vibes of Coruscant's depiction in the Clone Wars. In the cartoon, like because the that's where you see Coruscant the most is in Clone Wars, because obviously it's during the Republic is still around, the Jedi Temple is still there. A lot of the Clone Wars is focused on the Jedi, that so like we see Coruscant a lot, and like the Coruscant episodes of Clone Wars are really fun. There's a great 2-parter with R2-D2 and C-3PO that is fucking hilarious. It's so good. Like I urge you, like if you're doing the rewatch, just enjoy those. They are so great. It's like C-3PO has to find a cake for Padme's like fucking party or something like that, and they're like trying to, we gotta get a. And then R2-D2 goes like, "Ooh, a droid massage parlor. I'm gonna go to that," And it's as good as it sounds, JP. I'll tell you that right now. It's as fucking as good as it sounds.
And a sleazy Star Wars.
I love it. I love it. It's great. But yeah, I thought the housing was it's a halfway house, right? It's basically you guys, we're going to reintegrate you into society, but you got to stay here first. And before, as we determine whether or not you're safe to go out, they obviously make reference that they cannot leave a certain zone of where they live and work. And they're just given like kind of menial jobs like that are beneath their like qualifications, especially in Dr. Pershing's case. He's not doing anything medical related. He's just a bureaucrat, like doing administrative, like, data punching. Yeah,
getting rid of like effectively anything imperial, which we come back to on again with these things about the idea of not even, some interesting things that Elia manages to bring up. I mean, they have a whole, conversation there between them. You can already see that there's, one of the things that Pershing brings up is like, what did they miss from being in the Empire? And he mentions about travel biscuits being in their rations, to which other people sat around are either kind of loving or hating. And then as he's about to go to bed, there's a knock on the door, looks down. What does he find? He finds some travel biscuits on there, the yellow ones that he likes as well. To which then, next day we see about his job, which is, archiving data in that. So he's completely being underutilized, like you mentioned on there as well. And you can see that this is going to lead to the kind of frustration that Elliot plays on. As they're going out into the town, agrees to have a look around Coruscant, and he's a very sort of nervous character. And it's like, he's been out in the outer rims. The idea that he'd be near like this kind of a planet that's labeled the center of the galaxy as well, that's going to completely blow his mind. He is like walking around eating, I don't know what you think, electronic lollies. I don't know if you could really think of it as any other one.
Well,
Seems an accident waiting to happen.
It's very Star Wars. Like,
it is.
What's a twist on like a lollipop? Oh, they're fluorescent and they glow in the dark. Like maybe Brett Lauderdale can like kind of incorporate these into like GCW when Light Tube production ceases in the next globally in the next several years. And what's he gonna do? I get these Star Wars lollipops that glow in the dark as my new deathmatch go-to prop.
Yeah. None of these environmentalists ever think about the cost on deathmatch wrestling, do they?
It's exactly like the damn wokes. You're ruining my deathmatch enjoyment. Connor asked, was this the first we had seen of post-Empire stuff for how the officers reintegrated? I think to this extent, so. Like this idea of like an amnesty program. Otherwise, I think most of the time in Legends and Expanded Universe stuff, it's like they're either part of the Imperial Remnant or they're like defectors.
I was gonna say deserters,
or in prison. Nothing like this amnesty program, because you can't really like the file and rank of the Empire. You can't really like judge them. They're just a lot of them just soldiers doing their jobs, right? They just that was their job and stuff like that. When we get back to Pershing in his new like kind of job as this administrator, like I got like vibes of Cyril Karn. His job on Coruscant, so that was like, you gotta imagine like fucking Jon Favreau watched Andor is like, oh fuck, I gotta incorporate that. That's a good idea. I'm gonna,
These guys have raised the game. I'm gonna have to kind of step it up on that front as well. I mean, you should mention about like, I mean, because they go to see the tip of on Coruscant, the tip of the mountain that you mentioned earlier about on there as well. They're bonding, but it's not like you're thinking this is setting up like some sort of like, I don't know, a trite romance or something along those lines. Instead, what we end up talking about is she ends up talking about his work and about whether or not his knowledge is being used in the best way, and could he not use that to benefit the New Republic. He says, it's not going to be difficult about it because he mentions about the ethics of cloning. She says, well, if it's going to help people and it's going to help the New Republic, is that not the bigger thing to take into consideration there as well? And she points out that blindly following orders is what caused them to be used and manipulated by the Empire in the first place. So,
by the way, the mountain is called Umate.
Umate. Good lad.
Umate. Looking this up. Yeah, like this is where like I really think it's Katie O'Brien, right?
Yeah.
Really shines in this episode as Elia Kane, where you think, oh, she's totally bought into this. Or has she? Because like there's some ambiguity with her character because she was a very devoted follower of Moff Gideon in season 2 of The Mandalorian. And so like, okay. And then we take into account like the title of this episode, which is the convert. And when we get to the end of this, our recap of this, I think we'll talk about how this title works on so many different levels for not just people in the amnesty program, but for also like we'll talk about Bo-Katan as well, because I think it's purposely meant to apply to a lot of characters. But you would especially think with Kane's character, she is the main convert we are actually looking at, not so much Pershing. I feel it's mainly O'Brien. Katie O'Brien as Elia Kane, that I think we're gonna like say, okay, she's the main convert that this episode is titled after. And she's obviously later on there's like a point where like there's a whole sight gag of like, Pershing talking about being led into a trap to a Mon Calamari, which I
Yeah.
which I was like, that's hilarious. But she is like, you used a good word in your recap that you sent to me, which is like she's a sociopath,
Yeah.
and like it didn't occur to me like, yes, she loves this new role because like, oh, she can continue being kind of who she is psychologically in the New Republic, like if she does like what she did to Pershing to other former Imperials.
Yeah. She gets to, you know, she gets to fuck with him, basically, is what she
Yeah.
does. And we see it towards the end of this particular story, I should say, as well. So I mean, he's shut down the idea of going back to cloning. She says, sleep on it. At which point, you know, he ends up meeting a new Republic amnesty droid who gives him like a parole interview, effectively, which is, it's done with all for anyone familiar with like any HR things or like occupational health and having to speak to them. There's like you're having issues at work and you speak to people who can't really do anything to help you at all, because it'll always be down to things like kind of workload and the rest of it. But he does ask the droid whether or not he's able to continue his research recreationally, but it says this is against the new Coruscant Accords, therefore it's illegal. At which point, Pershing says about, to Elia Kane that he actually wants to continue his research there as well. She says she knows how to get the supplies that he needs, but they'll have to travel outside of the designated living area, as you mentioned on there as well. Which then next day at work, he notices that the New Republic is about to scrap a ton of Imperial equipment. And this is one of the things that would have completely like worked against him when you kind of go to what the twist that it goes, is that he's talking about scrapping this Imperial equipment, about it being a waste, and saying no, that there's no solutions for this because of bureaucracy, which we've kind of seen. And it does give that, the New Republic not being particularly better in that regard. They haven't kind of thought to themselves, actually, how are we going to reuse these things to benefit it? It's like, no, scrap it. It's like we can't almost like talk about it, rather than like kind of trying to kind of deal with it in any way, shape or form. And this sort of just adds to Pershing's frustration at this stage. And next time he meets the program droid and asks the question about if he felt any anger or resentment, he doesn't answer it first up on there. And then he does ask the droid whether helping the New Republic supersedes all other considerations. When it answers yes, this is where he decides to go along with Elia Kane's plan of leaving the district where they're bound to and creating a mobile lab.
That's right. Going to the shipyards. This train sequence, you know what it reminded me of? Walter Hill's The Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it reminded me of. Like them just going down the, first of all, like jumping the rail to get onto the train. And then them like
I've done that technique, by the way, of getting through barriers on the tube in London many times.
I've never done it. I did not pay for my travel back to Newark, New Jersey, where my hotel was with John Pollock. After we had a lovely time in Times Square, and we were going to catch the last train. But Beto, Steph, and Wei, and everyone else got fucked, and they had to wait another hour. Not me and John. We were just like, okay, when the train conductor comes, we'll just pay the guy then and there. If it's extra, no problem. We're gonna get home before we're gonna get back to our hotel before everyone else. And then we didn't end up paying because the train conductor did not get to us before we got to our stop. So
that's one up over the system, mate. Good lad.
But yeah, it totally gave me these vibes, and like Elia Kane obviously has shown like she's done this multiple times. She's the one who got the travel packs, the travel rations for Pershing that she left at his door. I would imagine she likes to go look at the Star Destroyers that are being decommissioned and scrapped, maybe to remind herself of like her former life. Who knows? But there's a chase where basically the train conductors, the ticket conductors of these Coruscant trains come looking for, tickets, please, tickets, please. Because okay, so are they cops? Are they also cops? These robots,
Not
these droids?
really. They're not like kind of. Would there be like kind of transport police? I
I
don't know if you have
suppose.
that in Toronto, but it used to be like
No,
a.
not for like the subway system here in Toronto. No,
Ah,
because we do see like droid cops, and droid cops are something that we see in the Clone Wars. That a lot of the policing has to be done by droids, and they look like. I kind of always get the impression they're meant to be based on like Keystone cops, like with
mm,
those tall hats that Keystone cops would wear. So I think they've rebrought these droids back up, whether or not they were decommissioned and replaced with like the K2SO type droids that we see in Andor,
yeah.
like brutalizing people. Um,
If it's anything
but
like train conductors in London, then yes. Because if you were a small guy, I tell you what, you were like the threat of violence was always there from people who are like, I'm not paying and you're not going to make me pay. To the point
yeah,
where it appeared to be they were hiring bouncers to do the job, so they could, so they weren't going to take any shit off anyone.
so they're traveling between cars, and that this is where
Yeah.
it's like it's kind of like reminds me of the Warriors as well. And they get to their stop and they just decide let's jump. They jump off the train and they're at the shipyards.
Which is, and I think the thing that's good about this as well is it's the idea that like his life is so mundane at this point, like with him being in the amnesty program, even though he kind of appreciates what it's like, that him diving off this, like he has a smile on his face. Like this is the idea of like that there is some excitement in his life and he feels like, okay, like there's something at least like going on there. But yeah, they get onto the Star Destroyer, they find a lab with everything he needs, and you know, Elia Kane says that there's no one guarding the decommissioned ships. They hear footsteps approaching as they attempt to leave. They run outside and they're surrounded by New Republic forces who place Pershing under arrest, but then not Kane, who steps out in front of him and takes the illegal medical contraband as evidence on there as well. To which then we get into the kind of like, this is where we're talking about like the Black Mirror side of
Right.
things.
Yeah. So is she
In
a narco?
particular.
Is that what her job is? Is she a narco for like the amnesty people? Is like she's undercover trying to root out people who still believe in the empire, want to still be Imperials, and then, or is this like this first? Because I do not believe this is the first time she's done this.
No, not at all. I mean, I kind of felt on initially on this one, it was like, okay, so does she need him in order to get the kind of contraband, like in terms of the resource that you might need for the cloning, to then go to Moff Gideon at this point? I was wondering, is that the case? And it's like, okay, could she not have just gone in and taken it herself? Did she not, you know, but does she need to be able to frame him as well at the same time and kind of build up her own standing there? Are they gonna like, is the mind flayer that they use on Dr. Pershing, is that going to be used to, you know, is it just going to be a case where he's going to be able to carry out his function in terms of cloning, but not remember anything else? Like these were the things that I found myself kind of like thinking of in the sequence itself.
Obviously, she was kind of what's the electroshocked into by this mind flare on the low settings, where it's like we're gonna remove the Imperial brainwashing. Like I don't think people joined the Empire because of brainwashing. It's I think they just believed in the propaganda at the time. Like
Yeah,
I guess they're trying to remove the indoctrination of being in the Imperial military, something like that.
which is the way that the New Republic here has. This is where you start to lose the moral high ground, because obviously, you know, should explain that when they, you know, when they capture him, they find there's a doctor. There's a great gag as well at this point where he talks about it being a trap.
Yes.
And he is, what is it? I mean, Admiral Akbar, but he's
Calamari. He's Mon Calamari. So
Mon Calamari. But yes, is that, you know, he recognizes he's being hooked up to a mind flayer, but they're saying, no, we use this for good now. And it's much less invasive and it's pain free. And keeps on saying, she set me up. At which point, Kane's supervisor says, you know, this is incredibly sad. He's relapsed, talks about how good she is as well. But she asks to stay, you know, because Pershing was her friend, and he's just relapsed. When he leaves, absolutely turns the thing up to 11 on there as well. and it's just proper red rays going into your head, which is never a good look. I
No.
would say for this kind of thing. And her reaction to it, and this is where you get the real proper sociopath tendencies, just biting into a travel biscuit and just
Yeah.
watching along.
Well, the alarms go off, right? The alarms go off, so they're gonna come back. And what are they gonna do to her now? It's like, what the fuck did you just do? You lobot like I get the feeling that
Yeah,
he's probably been lobotomized.
sodomized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like there's nothing left of his mind. Which, if that's the case, then that aspect of the Mandalorian story, the cloning stuff, is kind of like put off to the side. He's not going to be involved. Pershing's not going to be involved in that aspect of it. Maybe we're now moving away from like the idea of connecting this with like how did Palpatine come back? What is the house is connected to Supreme Leader Snoke, and what's Grogu's connection to all that? Obviously, it's for the blood to like give a clone of force sensitivity. Da 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 da. So, but it's interesting. Like, I do think we're gonna probably find out what Pershing's actual fate is, if he's been fully lobotomized or if he's just been like he's still functional to some degree. But what also happens to Kane? Like, does she get mind flayed as well? Because like, oh, you what the hell? You just like lobotomized this dude. What the hell? Like,
just stands there eating a travel biscuit, going, "Old dog, new tricks." Oh, well.
So, like, to me, like this is where I think the convert means that she's been like she's been electroshocked into being less imperial, but it didn't cure her of being a sociopath. So now she's a sociopath on behalf of the New Republic, and this is like, oh, he's actually gonna do his, like what he was doing for the Empire. I'm gonna make sure I trap him in and get him arrested and hook him up to a mind flayer, and then I'm gonna turn it up to 11 while he's doing that. And hold on a sec.
Yeah. That's all right.
Yeah.
I'm also going to be absolutely fascinated to see how this manages to tie itself into the greater kind of Mandalorian universe. Like, where in terms of this story as like an isolated kind of story, I think the intrigue for me is how we're going to work it into for the remaining episodes of this season as well. For this, I mean, it was kind of horrible, because Dr. Pershing you completely sympathize with the whole way through. He's been kind of goaded into this as well. Like, I mean, that's the idea, if she is doing this because she is like this sociopath for the New Republic, then she's effectively, it's entrapment. It's as a way of and then effectively, yeah, I'm going to completely stitch you up, and then you're going to have your mind wiped. But yeah, how this works into the other episodes after this, I'm absolutely fascinated.
I mean, with Pershing, it's always been assessed like he's kind of like, incredibly naive and just been, like kind of bullied into doing stuff for the Empire and from Moff Gideon. And like now he's like, he thinks he has freedom under the New Republic, but he doesn't, and he's not allowed to pursue his life's work, his passions, which is like cloning technology to legitimately help people. So
yeah,
it's kind of a tragedy what happens to him.
It's like someone who wants to do stem cell research getting hijacked into making kind of like universal soldier type super soldiers.
Exactly. Yes.
Which the novelty of which, don't get me wrong, if they turn up looking like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren, I'm not necessarily against, even if Dolph Lundgren is completely crazy.
There is one of the few good sequels to Universal Soldier. I forget what the exact subtitle of it is. It stars a British action legend, Scott Adkins. Do you know who he is, Jason?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's in the new John Wick, I think, as well, actually.
Yeah. He's like the star of like one particular, and he fights Andrei Arlovsky is also in it, and they have like this brutal fight in like I think in like a shop, a clothing store or something like that. It's on YouTube. I've seen the whole thing. It's like, it's pretty good. I think that's the one where Jean-Claude is actually the bad guy now.
Okay.
So
I need to know maybe board the Universal Soldier train.
This is like the period where JCVD is like, you know what? I'm gonna expand my range. I'm gonna play villain. So like, he's great in Expendables too, as the villain in that movie. So I highly recommend the Expendables 2, even though it is kind of mindless trash. It's fun mindless trash.
Yeah, it's the kind of mindless trash that I can completely get on board with on there, which isn't what we get here. I mean, I would say, I think the only thing that would be mindless possibly now is Dr. Pershing, as we mentioned, through the Mind Flayer. But that's not how the episode ends. Even though, after this, we go back to, this is where we talk about the bookends, and we go back to Bo-Katan and Din Djarin, who've arrived at the planet where the rest of the Mandalorians are in hiding, and they're met at the cave entrance by Paz Vizsla, who refuses them entry on account of Din Djarin being an apostate, dismisses the claim of bathing in the living waters. Bo-Katan backs him up as a witness, says that she is an apostate because she's part of Clan Kryze, but then shows him that he brought a sample of the water back, which means he gets entrance into the cave. And then we get the armorer taking the water, pouring in some other water, really, by the looks of it, but does prove that it's legit. Says that Din Djarin is redeemed, and also Bo-Katan as well. And
there's a point where when he's talking to Paz Vizsla outside, he shows, I have proof of the living waters. And then there's a shot of the other Mandalorians looking at each other. They're thinking, oh, wait, the living waters still exist? The mines of Mandalore still exists? Oh my God. So this is like, obviously this is like a huge thing for their creed, for their culture, for their religion, the mines of Mandalore and the living waters, because this is where Beskar armor comes from. I think this is the idea, like these particular waters and these mines have elements that allow them to forge Beskar, or where Beskar is maybe synthesized from, or like maybe they've hardened to the point where like we can now mine these things to create our armor and things like that. So that's when he says, okay, you can come in. Like you say, the armor proves that these are indeed the living waters, because we've seen her do this before. It's like she obviously has a cachet of living waters still, like that she takes with her to different hiding places throughout the galaxy when the covert moves from different locations. That she says, you're redeemed, but then she also says to Bo-Katan, like, you're redeemed. She's like, Bo-Katan's like, but I don't walk the creed, like, just so you know. She's like, have you bathed in the water? She's like, yeah. Have you removed your helmet since? No. He's like, okay, well, to us, you are now you're redeemed, so you can join our covert, you can leave. And it's they're not like Scientologists where like you can't leave. They can leave if they want to leave. They can leave. They can take off their helmets, but as soon as that happens, you're not part of the covert anymore until you can bathe again. Like, this is a really convenient thing. It's like, oh, you just have to go take a bath in your armor and don't take your helmet off and then you can rejoin our covert.
I'd have the helmet off all the time. I'd just go, look, I'm just going for a quick dip, just so I can just get it all back, just in case anyone gets annoyed with me. But when you said that about the Scientologists, I've now got an idea of a load of Mandalorians making a music video in the way that you see the Scientologists do. Do you remember that, the famous music video?
I try not to delve into Scientology on YouTube. I feel like my algorithm's gonna get all fucked up, and like I just want, like, Star Wars, MCU, and Japanese pop videos showing up in my algorithm as suggested videos.
This is, I would suggest, the Alex Gibney documentary about Scientology, which is absolutely incredible and goes into all the stuff about David Miscavige, who is nothing like the armorer in this. I think the armorer does seem, while being a fundamentalist at her core, I don't think she's got those kind of Miscavige tendencies. Well,
I like when she says they're both redeemed, then all the other Mandalorians are like, welcome. And like, you can tell, like, Din Djarin is like, yes, I'm back. Like, but Katie Sackhoff's body language is like, she's got the helmet on, so you can't see what her face is like, but you can tell by her body language, like, she's kind of moved by this idea.
Yeah.
That she's been abandoned by her branch of the Mandalorians because she didn't bring back the Darksaber. This group, like, that she did not like, she called a cult before, they're like, hey, if you haven't taken off your helmet and you've been in the waters, you're part of us. We accept you no questions asked. You can be part of our covert. And they accept her, and she's like obviously moved by this. And then there's a great shot. She looks over at the statue or the bust of
Mm.
the mythosaur made of Beskar in the armorer's forging room, I guess we would call it. But and like it now, it's like, well, okay, so she's the other main convert, because now she's been kind. You get the impression that she's going to be more like open minded to becoming part of this part of the Children of the Watch aspect of the Mandalorian culture, and that, but she keeps the mythosaur that it's alive, that it's on Mandalore in the mines. She keeps that to herself, and it's like, okay, what's her end game? It's interesting.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, I know one of the things I'd kind of noted down is this the idea of her trying to be able to get an even more dedicated army. I mean, are we ending up at the stage where Din Djarin's going to be the one to tame the Mythosaur Part 2 after Mandalore the Great? I thought it was fascinating you mentioned from the body language perspective. What I really got from it is the idea just being part of a community. Like, it's the idea of, what it might feel as people who are members of religious communities who end up leaving and then become quite lost and end up going back into like a form of it, which can be both good and bad things depending on the kind of communal environment that you're going into. So like, and it's, that says a lot. You're able to tell this through body language. The actor's got a big bloody helmet on. These aren't the things that are kind of should seem particularly obvious. And I think that's the thing about this episode. It's an episode where there's a lot of nice, subtle touches on here. We should go as a shout out to the director of this episode. I'm just bringing up their name. If IMDb will actually work on here.
Isaac Lee Chung.
There we go. Who is another debutante in terms of directing episodes within the Star Wars universe. As well, I'm just looking at some of the other work. Minari seems to be the film that is most recently produced on here, which I think was nominated for an Oscar on there. So yeah, he's doing all right for himself now. That's the last piece of work he did. That was in 2020, and that stars Stephen Yeun, who you might remember from Walking Dead. It says a Korean family starts a farm in 1980s Arkansas on there. Sounds like Oscar bait, if you're asking me as well.
Totally, yeah.
My cynical hat on. I'm watching that, and I won't lie. I see the word Arkansas, and I'm like, okay.
Koreans.
Could I fall asleep to this? It's not Koreans.
Korean people. No, isn't it Korean people in Arkansas?
In Arkansas.
Okay. So next this week's episode coming up is called the Foundling. It's directed by Carl Weathers, who's making his return. To directing an episode. It's written by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. So expect definitely a lot of lore. Probably the family, like, is it Grogu specific episode? Maybe is it about Din Djarin's past? Who knows? Like, I'm very fascinated now. Like, and it should be fun to talk about this. But yeah, Katie Sackhoff has said in interviews, like she like, because like I remember like there's a group interview with the cast, and like Emily Swallow will tell you, like she doesn't like the helmet. Maybe it's different now, but at first she didn't like the helmet because she's always afraid she's going to trip over herself because she can't see anything. She has no peripheral vision. She can't look down. And Pedro Pascal, I think, just like accepts it as a challenge. But Katie Sackhoff was like, I love wearing the helmet. It really gets me into the character. It really, it's a device she uses to like transport herself, because it reminds her of being in the recording studio doing voiceover work as Bo-Katan. And that she's like, I actually like wearing the helmet. Like, I would imagine like Pedro Pascal at this point is just like used to it, and he's like, yeah, it gets me to the character. I can become Din Djarin easily when I'm wearing the helmet.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting though. There's a recent thing that I've noticed in the end credits when they do the cast credits is like they now credit Crowder and Brendan Wayne, who are the stand-ins for
Mm.
Pedro Pascal. So Lateef Crowder does all the hand-to-hand combat stuff because he's a stuntman and he's also a martial arts expert. So like the fight between Din Djarin and Moff Gideon is him. He's the one doing all the hand-to-hand combat stuff. And then Brendan Wayne is, I think he's like the grandson or something like of John Wayne. And he does all the gun stuff that Din Djarin does. Like, so basically Pedro Pascal, I think he does some of this stuff, but like for the most part, the more intricate stuff, like the drawing of the gun, is Brendan Wayne, who is he is. Let me see if I can find him in
I've
here.
just got him up on here now. Actually, I'm just clicking onto here. Yeah, he was. He grew up there from Loretta Lung to Maureen O'Hara. Wayne was. I'm thinking just mentioning about his granddad now in a second. He's born in California as well. Oh, there it was. Yeah, that's his aunts and uncles. Yeah, his grandfather John Wayne on there as well.
He's the grandson of John Wayne.
Yeah.
Okay. So so that's a kind of like a little neat little, trivia that like John Wayne's grandson is a gun expert and doing like quick draws and like gunfighting in movies, and that's cool. But they credit these two now because I think they they were probably like there's such a big part of like I know Pedro Pascal has interviews. He's like he goes out of his way, like they're as much part of the character as I am. Like I can't do this role without them. Like there's like he always goes out of his way to mention them because he's like, legit. Pedro Pascal is probably one of the nicest human beings in the world.
Yeah.
Especially for someone in his profession. So like, I think it's really nice that they get credited in the end credits. So
yeah, you get that impression of him whenever you see him being interviewed as well. I mean, I've watched a whole lot of Last of Us stuff as well, and you get the impression that between him and Bella Ramsey that they had a great relationship as well, and that he appreciates the position, but I think he also slightly appreciates the slight ridiculousness of him of what he must feel of being. I'm kind of the most famous actor in the world at the moment.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a position to be in.
I mean, you could argue like these are the two biggest television shows.
Yeah, in the
world right now. Like there's no one who's a bigger television star than he is right now. And I would imagine it's just like he's happy doing television right now, like streaming television for HBO and for Mandalorian, because one, it's Star Wars that he can be proud of.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Oscar Isaac is like banging his head against the wall. It's like, oh fuck, I should have just held out for this. I could have been fucking Din Djarin, fuck. And like Last of Us, like, I'm gonna finish the rest of the season. I've only watched episode 1, but like everyone tells me like he gets to show his acting chops as Joel in this show. So like he's got to be, it fulfills all his things, and he still has time to go if he wants to do a movie. There's room in his schedule for doing both shows that he can go off and do bang out a movie project here and there. And so like
I'm just saying, I'm looking at his upcoming work on there. He's doing a film with Pedro Almodovar called Strange Way of Life. There's another show called Freaky Tales, which I don't know if this is part of like, Ben Mendelsohn's in that actually. If we're going to go, yeah, which is always good in there. The directors, Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. I'm trying to think of what they've made before because I'm sure I've seen them make a whole series. Captain Marvel, of course it was.
Oh well, yeah, that doesn't really fill me with any hope because I did not like that. That's probably my least favorite. One of my least favorite Marvel movies is Captain Marvel. It's a bit of a mess. But yeah, like Pedro's in this really great spot as an actor. Like he's financially set probably for life now because of Mandalorian. And like he can just pick and choose. He doesn't have to take jobs for money. He doesn't have to pay for a pool. Like some people will like, this is my pool. I need a new pool. I'm gonna do this job. Some people do in Hollywood. Like, why'd you do that movie?
Caine, famously got the script for Jaws 4, and it said opening scene in exterior Bahamas, and he went, "I'm in." Like that was
Yeah.
effectively it. Like, and I just thought that was when Michael Caine was really just purely in it for the money. Before, I don't know, for the revival really happened with like Cider House Rules, I think it
Cider
is.
House Rules and Batman, and
And
then
Batman. Yeah,
Christopher Nolan said, like, I'm going to put you everything I make. So,
yeah.
um,
And he did some great stuff. I'd recommend Harry Brown for those who haven't seen that as well. But yeah, that takes us to the end of this week's episode. I mean, just a couple of comments here in the chat as well. Good to see you, Ewan. Nice to be dropping in. He mentions that it was entirely purposeful that Bo-Katan kept her helmet on after going in. She usually takes it off immediately, but something must have changed her feelings, probably losing her home as well.
yeah.
So you can see that in there. So what have you got to plug, good sir, before we leave the viewers
Well,
this week?
I was listening to Spotlight last week, and Benno has said that the episode of The Business with Maddie Edwards
Yes.
that I was a guest on is dropping this week. I don't know if it's already come out yet or not. So go listen to that. It's
Thanks, mate.
yeah. I don't know. Some listeners get mentioned in a slanderous way by me. Just kidding.
Good. That's all right.
For their very weird fetishist love of Joshi. I think that narrows it down. You'll have to listen to hear what I'm talking about. But no, it's fun. I had a great time talking with Maddie, and
Brilliant.
and that was primarily a wrestling centric conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he wants to do one about what do you call it? The 4 pillars: movie, television, music, and sport. Like,
Sport.
I don't know about sport for me is like I only like wrestling is my sport, like
Yeah.
But that's coming up. I'm gonna do post Perez with John Pollock. We're gonna talk about what's been happening in Japan recently,
Mm-hmm.
as well as like our we both attended the GCW in Toronto last night as of this recording, and so we'll give our thoughts about that. All I'll say is if you are a wrestler on that show and you like to do cartwheels, please don't listen. You will not like what I have to say. You do that, and then
do one specific wrestler with that in his name.
Well, listen, there's a lot of stuff I will talk about, and a lot of wrestlers I will talk about on that show. I don't think we're going to devote too much time to it, but like,
I'm looking forward to that, man.
That one particular wrestler who's like does a lot of cartwheels, I'm not a fan of. But anyways, I also have an episode of the Long and Winding Railroad coming up. We're talking about Vader versus Kenta Kobashi from the Champion Carnival of Finals of 1999, Ooh. And I do that with Kieran LaForte of Must See Matches. So that's a fun conversation. Yeah, that's what I got coming up, and of course, hopefully next week we will be back here on GRAPPL and talking about the Foundling. What is that about? I'm so excited not to get up early in the morning to watch this episode before I go to work.
Yeah, I'll be buzzing about watching this one. I'll tell you after this because I just can't tell the direction it's going in as well. I mean, you mentioned Kieran LaForte there. I'd say I was recording with him last week, talking about with him and Mark Buckley on the Must See Matches project, which is fantastic, by the way. If you haven't listened to it as a podcast, just like the breadth and range, even if there's like just for a series you can dip in and out of as well.
What do you do? Steve versus Brett?
Steve versus Brett. Steve versus Brett won on this. So Survivor Series at Madison Square Gardens in 1996.
I love that match. I love that match.
So do I.
That match. And I love 13.
Oh yeah. 13. I was the high man, but it's like you need to see this because it lays the groundwork for the stuff that comes in 13 in terms of the aggression and everything else. But it's I loved recording that as well. There is going to be a new podcast you mentioned about the 4 pillars of life. Time is what it's called, and we're looking at the all very like you mentioned about the 4 pillars there. Sport from November 93. So sport, television, music, and film.
Okay,
at that
so
stage.
I would consider film and TV to be almost the same. Like I would combine those two. Music, okay. Film, television would be one thing. Okay, there's 3. Okay, what was okay? So then it's sport. Like no, for me, no.
You're not having that.
It's food. It's food, and then I don't know. of life. Like, wouldn't that be getting laid? Wouldn't that be like the fourth one?
I don't know if we could
Maybe-
do a podcast on that. In faurness, I think we get into
Well,
a
I
hell
mean,
of a lot of trouble if we did.
he's newlywed, so he probably would get in trouble if he talked about that. But
Exactly.
I'm a single man, so it's okay. No, but I'm just
Congratulations,
kidding.
mate. He's on his way over, flying over as we speak, over to
Yeah.
New York for his nuptials.
I warned him about the cosplayers in Times Square, how to avoid them.
I think he's going to be embracing all of that. He's apparently they're going to see a recording of the Drew Barrymore like daytime TV show, which shows you how old I am. That's what Drew Barrymore's up to these days. So you keep on thinking he's going to end up hosting. There's no way this man is not going to be able to get an advert out of that about appearing in that audience as well. But really looking forward to when you get a chance to listen to this one as well. Little Meatloaf's "I Will Do Anything for Love" was number one at that point in time in the UK, as it was for about 15 weeks.
I have a dirty little story about that, in the sense, like, I think I know what anything but I think I know what the "but" that is, but like I can't really say. Okay. I'll tell you privately what it is.
And we've got Spotlight tomorrow, so I'll be doing some catch up this week. We'll be talking a bit, I imagine, AEW. I'll be watching some of Noah. I think New Japan Cup finishes up, so I'll try and catch the main stuff from there and in there as well.
Talk about Sonata's new haircut and shave.
Yeah, just 5 guys. Which
did you see it? His new look.
He's had a shave. I haven't seen this at all.
Oh fuck! Okay, I won't spoil it. Me and Pollock were talking about it yesterday. We were talking about Sonata's new look yesterday. It was a highlight of our dinner at the Mexican restaurant we were at, along with my Portobello Primavera. Wow, chef's kiss.
I saw the photo you put up on Instagram. Very, very tasty.
Ever have a spicy margarita, JP?
I haven't. No. Is it a bit?
It was really peppery. And like my friend Mike Murray, who's been to this restaurant before, so he was there with his new girlfriend. This is where they had their first date. This restaurant. That's why he suggested it. It's also close to the Opera House, which is where CCW was. He goes, "Order the spicy margarita." So I got it, and he's like, "It wasn't this dark before when I had it for the first time." And he's like, "Okay, well," and I'm like, "Okay." Like, it was fine. I could quite enjoy it, but I didn't finish it because, one, I have very low tolerance for alcohol, and two is like, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea if I finish this. So I just, I drank half of it, and it's like, that's fine. I'll
quit while you're ahead on that one.
Quit while ahead. That's why I've learned with alcohol and myself. But yeah, 4 pillars: film, music, film and television, music, food, and I don't know, friends. I would talk about my friends, my friendships in life. So there you go.
Oh, proper mature 4 pillars there. Not mine. As well, which is always very childish. But yeah, that takes us to the end of this week's episode, which means that all we've got to say is goodbye there.
Bye there.